Welcome to another Roll for Crit review. Today we are taking a look at a unique hybrid of role-playing and board games with Keepers of the Questar from Upper Deck. In this two-player head-to-head game, each player gets to take on the role of an adventurer and a quest master, simultaneously managing their own board and map that they've planned out, while also adventuring and trying to solve an objective in a different one.
This game will have you pretty much mirror your opponent, with each of you receiving a screen for you to hide information, as well as two boards. One that will go behind the screen with all your information as you are the quest keeper for your opponent, and their own board where they'll adventure around and find, hopefully, the quest star or maybe run into some monsters. You're each going to choose matching maps of each, so you're technically going to have one behind your screen and one that's different. We're just going to show these off. You're going to have a screen, and you're going to use that to help decide when you do set up what monsters or traps you're going to have. Regardless, you'll have some levels 1, 2, or 3 of each. As you can guess, 3 is the strongest, 1 is the weakness. You're also going to have some other things to put in, entrances and exits, as well as depending on what kind of mission you're doing, for example, finding the quest star. That's usually what you're going to do. You're trying to find the object and get out while you survive. You'll also have this sheet here where you'll mark off which monsters or traps and stuff you use. This is actually a finished one, so you can see what happened here. But this is a way so you can remember what actually you decide to choose, and you can look at the back of the screen to know how those monsters or traps react when triggered.
Once both players have set up their hidden maps, then the game begins. On your turn, you're going to do a combination of actions with your adventuring party and then messing around a little bit with your hidden screen that's going to affect the other player. So on your turn, you get one action point or exploration point, they call it, for each adventurer in your party. So you'll start off with 4 because you're going to have 4 characters to work with. You can use those points to either move or investigate. Moving, you simply take your figure, which represents your entire party. You're not going to be splitting them up, and move them into one of the adjacent spaces, of course, keeping in mind walls and things like that you can't move through. Then, of course, the quest master is going to tell you if you encountered anything there. But if that's too risky for you, you can instead use the investigate action in one direction, and the quest master will have to tell you if there are any tokens in that space. You can try to get a little bit of a read of what's coming up and be a little bit more careful that way. Otherwise, you can dive headfirst into it, and depending on what tokens you encounter, different things will happen. Primarily, you're going to find monsters and traps, both of which, as soon as you find it, you will mark it on your personal map with these square pieces so you'll remember what's going on, and you flip them to the other side once they've been resolved. Whether it's a monster or a trap you encounter, there's going to be kind of a little mini game where the quest master will take these tokens and either secretly choose a letter. In the case of a trap, it's either T, R, A, or P, or in case of combat, a number 1 through 6, and the adventurer has to guess which one of those they are thinking of. And if they guess it correctly, they have completed that encounter. They've either defeated the monster or disarmed the trap. If they fail a trap, they might take some damage. All the traps have different effects. The monster will also deal damage, but if they defeat the monster, you can gain experience points, and each of these characters has special abilities with different powers that they'll gain. But if they take too much damage, then they will be eliminated, and you will lose some of your points, some of your characters, because you won't have the actions for them in future rounds. There's a few other things that you can worry about. There's treasure chests where you might find items. There's the wellspring that could heal your characters, and you can have different types of objectives. So it might just be to defeat certain monsters, but usually, or at least for the beginner setups, you're going to find that quest star, get out, and whoever does it first is the winner. After dealing with your adventurers, as the quest master, you also get to move one of your monsters one space. So there's a little bit of reaction or preparation behind the scenes the other player will have to deal with on the following turn.
This game is a back and forth of almost playing 2 RPGs at once, when you get to play as both the player and, in this case, the quest master. And what's really interesting about it is it almost feels like a teaching experience that it boils down to. You get to design the map and level. You can choose which map you use, and there are the walls, but you can decide, if you're doing the one searching for the quest star, I'm going to hide it in this room and have it guarded by the strongest monster. Or maybe you could hide it over here early on, closer to the end, and maybe they won't look there or something. And that can be a really fun experience. And of course, moving the monsters around is actually a fun thing. Do I want to run to level 1 here? Because before you were fine. Oh, there's nothing there. And you came down here and now when you come back, there's a skeleton. So there's a lot of fun in that sense too. And of course, the fact that you get to play both roles means, as you can ask probably any DM, I think this is mostly a DM problem, they would like to play as a player maybe sometime too.
You get to do both in this game. Here's a look at some of the other maps, and each one is double-sided, and there's 2 copies of each because you need one behind your screen. And they're all pretty different. They have some interesting layouts on there that you can play with. And yeah, you really do get more or less the experience of designing your own map. All that, all the hard part is done for you. You just have to decide within this framework, as we said, where do you place those pieces? And you could kind of try to make it thematic and fun, or you could just be like, no, the entrance is going to be, like here, and the exit is guarded by 12 monsters or in traps around its way or whatever. There are some limitations in how you can place tokens, but it's pretty freeform. And the game itself has, places where you can come up with your own items if you want. It's very homebrewable, I would say, as most good RPGs are.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's actually where some negatives are, because the rule book itself is a little bit weird. For example, it says, here are 3 objectives for you to do, one of them being finding the Questar. The other ones, they don't really tell you what they are. You almost have to homebrew it.
Yeah, it's very open-ended. It's really just like, here's some suggestions you can do. Here's how this might work or that might work. And once you move beyond the initial structure of it, I think you are going to want to add your own stuff in if you want to keep playing. Now, obviously, you can see the way combat works and disarming traps is very, very simple. There's no back and forth. There's not really any tactics involved. You might have some player powers that will help you with those things and make it a little easier, maybe add some more decisions for you to make. But for the most part, you're guessing a number.
Yeah, it does just feel like that. But I understand in a way, because I think it's better to come at this not as we're playing a regular board game. Like I said, I really feel like you want to come as an RPG sense. Like, this feels like a great teaching tool, because like Jonathan stated earlier, you could put the in this corner, the out in that corner, with every monster there and trap. But as a player, that's going to be an extremely boring dungeon. You're going to be just walking around until you find the quest, and then done, slowed down constantly. But if you come at this role playing like, okay, I'll put the out here, the in here, it's got a bit of a mirrored sense. And yeah, I'm going to have this creature roaming the halls, the big guy. And then if you come at it and try to describe these things a bit more story sense, you're going to have a lot more fun here. And I think that is where you're going to get the most of this game, is actually trying to learn to role play, not just min-max.
Yeah, I think it does a better job teaching the GM than it does a player.
I do, yeah.
There's not much opportunity for role playing like as your characters, unless you're really bringing it to the table.
I'm being broad with the role play, like not just being like you move, but being like as you walked, you feel you hear a loud snap as a trap, like that kind of.
Yeah,
I guess the GM's role playing.
Yeah, this might, and maybe this is a different point for me. Is just I found it kind of hard to. I just don't think the game, I think you really have to bring that into it yourself. I don't feel like the game really encourages that level of play. And I think maybe you'll do that the first 4 or 5 turns, but by like round 11, it's like, it's another skeleton. Guess a number. Like there's not that much to.
That's the problem with the really boiled down combat. Like, we're going to be talking about D&D because that's the obvious role-playing one. Even if you're just doing a no skill check roll, you have a 1 through 20. That's a huge variety of what is a 11 on a hit versus a 15 or versus a 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on their armor class.
Right. No, but I mean,
talking about a skill check or something.
There are 4 versus.
Right. Yes.
So you can do a lot more with that. But I do think the fact that you get to play both, you get to see both sides as well, which to me was a lot of fun, because I've had one okay dungeon master experience. I'm mostly the player. So being able to actually think okay, why should I put this here? Okay, I'll put the chest here and I'll have this monster around here. That might be like a cool little room to find or something. And the fact that they include multiple different themes of dungeons. So obviously this one is a desert theme. So I went with more skeleton, a spider, and a golem, like a bit Egyptian-ish. Like you could sort of go with what your map's going with instead of just simply choosing which ones you think have the highest numbers. Yeah.
I think for some people, even depending on your personality, you might think the opposite of us, and you might actually think it's more fun to play this as a purely competitive game. And I think if you have 2 players who who both feel that way and are like, no, I'm making this as hard as it can be and as confusing as it can be. An interesting meta could evolve of like, okay, I know you're going to put the entrance or the exit in the least obvious place. So that's the first place I'm going to look. So then maybe that changes the next time you play. So it could depend on your personality, what you get out of it. But I do agree that this to me feels like a really strong framework for almost more of a tool than a game all of its own that you can use and play with and experiment in different ways. It's like a playground where you can throw things on and see how they work if you are interested in DMing or playing a role-playing game, but maybe you don't want to take all the time it takes and the energy it takes to set that up.
Crits and misses for Keepers of the Questar.
Crits. Players get to be both adventurers and game masters in Keepers of the Questar, so you can experience the thrill of creativity and the discovery of what's going on in the dungeon you're exploring. Because the rules system is fairly open-ended, the game encourages player tweaking and creativity to make this your own game as much as you want it to be.
Anyone who is well versed in RPGs knows some of the best moments come when you decide to twist or add some homebrew rules and really make some unique experiences.
You don't need to be an expert dungeon master to play this game. The rules are simple enough and accessible enough that anyone can sit down and start learning how an RPG system of this style works.
If you're planning to dive into any RPG, this is a great tool for you to use to learn not only how a player may interact with your dungeon, but as a DM or GM, how should you design your dungeon to actually make it a great experience. Misses. We love homebrewing or making our own rules up, but we felt the rulebook did it a bit too much. There are some things that were not explained that we felt like should have been in there, even if you choose to ignore that rule or maybe change it up a bit.
I think that even with the rules as they're explained in depth in some areas in the rulebook, the game itself is just very simple, very basic. And I think to really get a good experience out of it, it almost requires the players to come up with their own ideas and contributions to spice things up.
These simplified rules really do help anyone dive in, but we felt like on the combat and traps as well, that maybe got a bit too simple. It is a quick guessing game and really just comes down to some random luck.
For a game of this style, you need a combat system that is simple and fast and not tedious, but this one ends up being tedious because it is too simple. It is just a guessing game, and it's going to get old for you pretty quick.
This tries to straddle the line between an RPG and a board game. And in some ways, it does a pretty good job, I think, of keeping the RPG elements. But because it fails a bit more on the board game side, if you have people with unequal interests, such as who are just there to win versus trying to roleplay and design something, it can leave a bit more of a sour taste in players' mouths. I like a lot of things this has to offer, but it comes down to the question, is this more of a tool for RPGs or is this a game? And I'm feeling more tool is the right word. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, because I actually think it was great for me to think of it as, okay, how would I build this dungeon? I had these walls and something. But as a board game, I don't think it's going to be like the replacement or addition to any dungeon crawler.
Yeah, I love the concept of it. I think it's a very cool idea to make this kind of hybrid game where you're both doing your own thing on your map. The most fun I had in this game was designing and setting up my map. Actually doing the exploring from the adventurer's perspective, I didn't find very fun for the most part. And I think that this is probably a good and interesting purchase if you are new to the world of RPGs, or you may want to introduce someone who's new and kind of give them a sense of what it's like. But if you're well versed in them at all, I would personally just rather play a simple RPG. If you want something fast and quick, there's plenty of one-shot RPGs with pretty light rules out there. I don't know that this is really going to be that intriguing to you if you're someone who's is playing Pathfinder or D&D every week. You're probably not going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I think this is an amazing purchase for someone who has a family, has kids who have yet to play an RPG, or even in a classroom, because this is a great way for them to think about the world and try to experience things in a rule set that is not like you have to worry about well, you have your proficiency bonus, but then you also got this bonus, but then you also got negative because of this condition. It's just flip a tile. And I think that is where this is going to really shine.
Yeah. On the other hand, maybe some people out there have come up with some really cool homebrew additions and turned this into an awesome game. I actually really wish they came with more kind of generic tokens so that you could be even more creative. I think they should have gone way further with it and had more of a like design your own game kind of a feel. Maybe they have some blank maps so you can even make your own maps.
Well, Jonathan, this is still partially a board game, so that means there's room for expansions.
They could always come out with those expansions. If you've played the Keepers of the Questar, or if you think it's something you would or wouldn't be interested in, give us your thoughts and opinions. You can talk to us about what you think in the comment section right down below the video here on YouTube.
Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, I'm Will.
I'm Jonathan.
And this has been Roll for Crit. Thank you for watching this whole video. It means a lot. If you want to help support us more, of course, you can simply just click that like and subscribe down there. You can go to our Patreon or visit our merch store. Fun fact, if you're at the high roller tier in our Patreon, you actually get a discount for some of the awesome merch we have in our store. So check both out.